till death do us part. It's a promise. A vow whispered in a church, witnessed by family and friends, and sealed with a kiss. It's supposed to mean a lifetime of love, of partnership, of trust. This is the story of Emily and Grant Walker. From the outside, they were the very definition of the American dream. They lived in a sprawling colonial home in the picture-perfect suburb of Weston, Massachusetts. They had 2 brilliant children, a circle of admiring friends, and a love story that people envied. Their vows, it seemed, were made of granite. But this is not a story about a perfect marriage. This is a story about what happens when those vows are broken. When trust evaporates, when love curdles into something dark and unrecognizable, and when "till death do us part" stops being a promise, and becomes a deadline. Pause. This is the story of a perfect life built on a foundation of lies. It's a story of devastating betrayal, and the chilling, methodical revenge that followed. On a cold Tuesday morning in October, a 911 dispatcher received a frantic call. The voice on the other end was choked with sobs, barely coherent. It was Emily Walker. She said she'd found her husband. Grant. He was in the garage. There had been an accident. A terrible accident. When paramedics arrived, they found a scene of domestic tragedy. Grant Walker, pillar of the community, was dead, crushed beneath his prized possession, a vintage 1968 Jaguar E-Type he'd been restoring for years. It looked like a simple, horrifying accident. A car jack that slipped. A man in the wrong place at the very worst time. The community wrapped its arms around the grieving widow. But one detective looked at the scene, at the body, at the grieving wife, and felt a cold nod of certainty. This was no accident. This was an execution. And the killer wasn't a stranger who had broken in. It was the one person who had promised to love Grant Walker, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, until death. By the end of this story, you'll see how far one person will go when the love of their life becomes the source of their deepest rage. Slight pause, music swells and fades. To understand what happened in that cold, pristine garage, you have to understand the life Emily and Grant Walker built together. And more importantly, you have to understand the life Grant was secretly tearing apart. Weston, Massachusetts, isn't just a town, it's a statement. It's old money, sprawling lawns shaded by ancient oaks, and a quiet, unspoken pressure to be perfect. The Walkers didn't just live in Weston, they were Weston. Their home was a masterpiece of New England charm, grey shingles, white trim, a garden Emily tended to with meticulous care. It was the kind of house where holidays were celebrated with perfect decorations and the wine was always expensive. Grant Walker was the face of their success. He was 48, devastatingly handsome, with a charisma that could charm anyone. He was a high-powered financial advisor in Boston, managing portfolios for the city's elite. He was the guy everyone wanted at their dinner party, the man who always had the right joke, the right compliment. His passion, his one visible vice, was his garage. Specifically, the vintage British racing green Jaguar E-Type inside it. He spent his weekends tinkering, covered in grease, meticulously restoring it. It was his baby. And then there was Emily. Emily Walker was the architect of their life. She was 47, elegant, with a quiet intelligence that often went unnoticed next to Grant's booming personality. She had put her own career on hold to raise their children, Alex and Olivia, who were now both away at prestigious universities. But Emily was no simple housewife. She ran the home like a CEO. She sat on 2 different charity boards. She organized the galas, she managed their complex social calendar, she was the silent, steady force that made Grant's success possible. She was the one who remembered birthdays, who sent the thoughtful gifts, who maintained the bridges with family. To their friends, they were the couple. The ones who still held hands. The ones who seemed to genuinely like each other after 25 years. They met in college, at Boston University. He was the ambitious business major, she was the brilliant literature student. It was a whirlwind. He was drawn to her calm, her depth. She was drawn to his energy, his belief that he could conquer the world. They married a year after graduation, in the same church where Emily's parents had been married. Their vows were traditional. Emily cried. Grant beamed. For 2 decades, life was good. They built their empire together. They raised 2 smart, well-adjusted kids. They had, by all accounts, everything. But perfection is a heavy mask to wear. And behind closed doors, small, hairline cracks had begun to form. It started subtly. Grant began working later. Much later. He'd come home after Emily was already in bed, smelling faintly of expensive scotch and a perfume that wasn't hers. When she'd ask, he'd brush it off. Just networking, Em. You know how it is. He became defensive about his phone. It was suddenly always face down. Or in his pocket. He, who had always been so open, now had passwords on everything. Then came the business trips. A weekend golf trip with a client. A conference in Chicago. He'd come back distant, emotionally unavailable. Emily felt the shift. The coldness in their bed. The way his eyes would look right through her. She was a smart woman. She wasn't naive. But she was loyal. She loved him. This was Grant. Her Grant. The father of her children. The man she had built her entire world with. So she rationalized. It was a midlife crisis. He was stressed at work. The market was volatile. She just needed to be more supportive. More loving. More perfect. She tried. She planned date nights, which he'd cancel at the last minute. She'd buy new laundry, which he wouldn't even notice. She felt herself becoming smaller, quieter, desperate. Friends started to notice, too. Is everything okay with you and Grant? Her best friend, Sarah, asked over coffee one afternoon. You seem tired. Emily forced a bright smile. The one she'd perfected. Oh, we're fine. Just busy. You know Grant, married to his work. But Sarah knew her. Emily, you've lost weight. You don't smile anymore. Not really. Emily just stirred her coffee, the silence saying everything. The man she loved was becoming a stranger. A cold, dismissive stranger who shared her bed. She felt a deep, creeping dread, a loneliness that was heavier than any argument. She was right to be afraid. But the truth was so much worse than she could have ever imagined. No one could have guessed what was happening behind the immaculate facade of the Walker home. But soon, the perfect couple everyone admired would make national headlines for all the wrong reasons. Because while Emily was trying to save her marriage, Grant was actively, and secretly, destroying it. Pause, music shift, the breaking point didn't come with a shout. It came with a click. The click of a laptop mouse. It was a Monday night. Grant was supposedly in New York for a 2-day client meeting. The house was silent, which had become its normal state. Emily was paying bills on the family's desktop computer in the study. She was checking their main checking account when she saw it. A transfer. $50,000. Made just 3 days prior. Transferred to an account she didn't recognize. Her blood went cold. $50,000 was not a small amount, even for them. Grant had never mentioned it. Her heart started to hammer in her chest. She scrolled back. Another transfer, a month before. $25,000. And another. And another. It was a hemorrhage. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, siphoned out of their joint accounts over the last 8 months. But where was it going? Her hands were shaking. She felt dizzy. This wasn't a midlife crisis. This wasn't work stress. This was something else. This was theft. She went into Grant's closet. He had an old briefcase he rarely used. She fumbled with the latch. Inside, beneath some old files, was a laptop. A second one. One she had never seen before. She opened it. It was unlocked. The screen lit up, and so did Grant's secret life. It wasn't a work computer. It was his other life. The desktop background wasn't a picture of her or the kids. It was a picture of him, on a beach, with a smiling, blonde woman in her late 20s. They were kissing. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. She physically recoiled, as if she'd been struck. She clicked on the photos. Hundreds of them. Trips. Dinners. Parties. A life she had no part in. A life he was living while he was supposedly on business trips. Then she found the emails. Her name was Amanda. She was a real estate agent in Miami. And she wasn't just his mistress. She was, in her mind, his fiancée. Emily read the emails, her vision blurring through tears of pure, undiluted rage. Grant had been promising to leave Emily for months. He told this other woman, this child, that his marriage was a loveless sham. That Emily was emotionally unstable. That he was just waiting for the right time to get out. But the real betrayal, the part that made Emily's blood turn to ice, was in the finances folder. Grant wasn't just planning to leave her. He was planning to ruin her. He had been systematically draining their assets. Their savings. Their retirement funds. Even their children's college funds, which Emily had so carefully managed. He was moving it all into offshore accounts this Amanda had access to. He was planning to file for divorce, claim Emily was unstable as he'd told his mistress, and leave her with the house, which he had secretly taken a massive second mortgage out on, and nothing else. He was planning to erase 25 years of her life. Her contribution. Her sacrifice. She wasn't just being replaced. She was being liquidated. Emily sat on the floor of his closet, surrounded by the smell of his cologne, and something inside her broke. The woman who cried over a sad movie, the woman who organized charity drives for sick children, she was gone. In her place was a cold, quiet void. She sat there for hours. The tears stopped. The shaking stopped. She just sat a day. And she thought. She thought about the last 25 years. The dinners she'd cooked. The clients she'd charmed. The children she'd raised. The sacrifices she'd made, all so he could build his career. And he wasn't just leaving her. He was laughing at her. He was spitting on her entire life. He'd told the other woman he'd be free by Thanksgiving. Pause. Rage is a powerful, clarifying emotion. It burned away the grief, the sadness, the desperation. And it left behind a single, sharp, crystalline thought. He cannot be allowed to do this. He cannot win. She closed the laptop. She put it back in the briefcase. She walked downstairs and poured herself a glass of water, her hand perfectly steady. She looked around the beautiful home she had made. The life she had built. And she began to plan. Music becomes tense, methodical. Grant was due home the next day. A Tuesday. Emily spent the morning in a flurry of activity, but not the kind you'd expect. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call her best friend. She went to the bank and withdrew $5,000 in cash, which she hid in her closet. She went to the grocery store. She called her son and daughter, just to hear their voices, her own voice sounding completely normal. Loving. Calm. She told them she loved them. She was proud of them. When Grant pulled his Mercedes into the driveway around 6 p.m., Emily was in the kitchen, roasting a chicken. The house smelled like rosemary and thyme. He walked in, loosening his tie. "Hey, Em. Rough trip. She turned, and gave him the same smile she always did. Welcome home. How was New York? Exhausting, he said, pouring himself a scotch. Clients are animals. He didn't kiss her. He didn't even look at her. He just grabbed his drink and headed for the garage. Dinner will be ready in an hour, she called after him. Great, he called back, his voice already distant. Gonna check on the Jag. Emily turned off the oven. The chicken was a prop. She waited 10 minutes. She walked to the study and picked up the heavy, bronze statue of a bull market award he'd won years ago. It was heavy. Solid. She walked to the garage. The side door hissed open, and she stepped inside. The smell of oil and gasoline hit her. Grant was leaning over the open engine bay of the Jaguar, his back to her. He was humming. The car was up on 4 hydraulic jacks, the wheels off. He didn't hear her approach. Grant, she said. Her voice was flat. Cold. He startled, banging his head on the hood. He spun around, rubbing his scalp, annoyed. Jesus, Emily, you scared the hell out of me. What? She was just standing there, by the tool chest, the bronze statue held loosely at her side. I know, she said. Grant's annoyance faded, replaced by confusion. You know, what? What are you talking about? I know about Amanda, Emily said. Pause, the silence in the garage was absolute. Grant's face went through a series of micro-expressions. Shock. Denial. And then, a cold, hard anger. He straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. You've been snooping, he said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I know about the money, Grant, she continued, her voice never rising. The bank accounts. The college funds. The mortgage. She laid it all out. Calmly. Factually. Grant looked at her. And in that moment, the man she had loved for 25 years vanished. The charming mask fell away, and she saw the monster beneath. He didn't apologize. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He laughed. It was a short, sharp, dismissive bark. So what? He sneered. What did you find, Em? My other a laptop? Took you long enough. Honestly, I'm impressed. Emily just stared at him. Yeah, I'm leaving you, he spat, tossing the rag on the tool chest. I'm done. I'm done with this house, I'm done with this town, and I am done with you. You were going to leave me with nothing, she whispered. The statue felt heavier in her hand. You are nothing, he yelled, his face turning red. You're a leech, Emily. You haven't worked a day in 20 years. You think you earned any of this? I built this. Me. You just decorated. He took a step toward her, jabbing a finger in her face. So yeah. I'm taking the money. I earned it. And I'm going to be with a woman who actually excites me. A woman who isn't cold and boring and old. He had spat the word at her. Old. He smiled, a cruel, vicious smile. So what are you going to do about it, Em? Huh? Call a lawyer? Cry to your friends? Go ahead. I'll be in Miami before you can even serve the papers. He turned his back to her. A fatal, arrogant mistake. He leaned back over the engine. Now get out of my garage. You're bothering me. Emily looked at the back of his head. The man who had shared her bed. The man who had held her children as newborns. The man who had just erased her entire life and laughed about it. Till death do us part, she whispered. She raised the bronze statue high above her head. And she brought it down with all the force of 25 years of love, loyalty, and white-hot, betrayed rage. Sound of a sickening, heavy impact. Grant didn't make a sound. He just collapsed. A puppet with its strings cut. He fell forward, his head hitting the engine block before he crumpled to the concrete floor. Silence. Emily was breathing hard. She looked at the statue in her hand. There was blood on the horn of the bull. She looked at Grant. He was still. The rage was gone. Replaced by a cold, surgical clarity. She knew what she had to do. She dropped the statue into a bucket of oily solvent near the workbench. She walked to the heavy, hydraulic floor jack that was supporting the front end of the Jaguar. She looked at Grant's body. She grabbed his ankles and, with a strength she didn't know she possessed, dragged him. Just a few feet. She positioned his head and torso directly under the front axle. She went back to the jack. She knew how it worked, she'd watched him use it a dozen times. She found the release valve. She didn't just kick it. She opened it. There was a loud, metallic groan and a terrifying hiss of hydraulic fluid. The 2-ton car didn't fall fast. It lurched, then fell with a sickening thud and a crunch. It settled onto her husband. She stood there, in the silent garage, her heart pounding a deafening rhythm. She looked at the scene. It was perfect. A tragic accident. She walked out of the garage, closing the door softly behind her. She went upstairs. She showered. She scrubbed her skin until it was raw. She washed the blood from the bronze statue, dried it, and put it back in the study, exactly where it belonged. She went to the kitchen and made herself a cup of tea. She sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours. Just Saturday. In the silence. Then, she picked up her phone, took a deep, shuddering breath, and dialed 911. She put the hysteria back in her voice. The panic. The grief. My husband, she screamed into the phone. The car fell on him. Oh my God, please, hurry. Please. When the first responders arrived, they found Emily Walker in the garage, on her knees, cradling her husband's bloody head in her lap. She was whispering, I love you, oh God, Grant, I love you. To the man she had just murdered. Pause, music shift to a slow, investigative theme, the town of Weston was shattered. A tragedy like this, it just didn't happen here. Grant Walker, a pillar of the community, gone in such a gruesome, random way. The initial police report was exactly what Emily had planned, accidental death. The entire community rallied around the devastated widow. Casseroles flooded the house. Friends and neighbors sat with Emily, holding her hand as she stared blankly out the window, the perfect picture of a woman broken by grief. The funeral was a massive affair. Emily, dressed in a modest black dress and veil, was a portrait of tragic dignity. She accepted condolences, leaning on her 2 children, who had flown home, their own faces masks of confusion and pain. It was perfect. Too perfect. Detective Miles Miller wasn't assigned to the case initially. It was an accident. But he was at the station when the first responders' report came in, and something about it bothered him. Miller was a lifer. Near retirement. He'd seen everything. And he had a finely tuned instinct for when things didn't add up. He decided to swing by the Walker house. Just to pay his respects. He found Emily in her living room, surrounded by flowers and concerned neighbors. He offered his condolences. Mrs. Walker, he said, his voice gentle. I'm so sorry for your loss. I wonder if you could just walk me through what happened? Just for the report. Emily recounted the story she had rehearsed. Her voice trembled. She'd called Grant for dinner, he didn't answer. She'd gone to the garage, and found him. It was awful, she whispered, a tear rolling down her cheek. The jack must have slipped. Miller nodded. Terrible. Just terrible. He asked to see the garage. Emily's friend Sarah offered to take him. Miller stood in the garage for a long time. The car was still there, but the police had lifted it off the body. The bloodstain on the concrete was dark and stark. He looked at the jack. He looked at the position of the bloodstain. He looked at the tool chest. Something was wrong. He went back to the station and pulled the preliminary EMI report. And that's when he found it. The medical examiner was a precise man. Dr. Aries. He noted the cause of death was massive cranial and upper torso crushing trauma, consistent with the vehicle. But there was a second injury. A pattern contusion with depressed skull fracture on the back of Grant's head. Inconsistent with the car, which had crushed him from the front and top. This second wound, Dr. Aries noted, appeared to have been inflicted before the crushing. It was a pattern wound. Almost like the horn of a small statue. Miller's blood ran cold. This wasn't an accident. This was a homicide, staged to look like an accident. He immediately, and quietly, opened a full investigation. He started where all good detectives start, money. He pulled the Walker's financials. And the perfect marriage dissolved before his eyes. He saw the transfers. The drained accounts. The second mortgage. He saw a financial motive big enough to drive anyone to desperation. He followed the money. It led him to a bank account in Miami. An account held by one Amanda Riley. Miller flew to Miami the next day. He found Amanda in a luxury high-rise condo. When she saw his badge, she burst into tears. She told him everything. She wasn't a malicious homewrecker. She was a 28-year-old woman who had been duped. Grant had told her he was in the final stages of a divorce. He'd shown her the offshore accounts, told her it was their money. Their future. He said his wife was sick, she cried. Mentally unstable. He said he was scared of her. He was supposed to be here, yesterday. He was going to tell her. Miller felt a grim certainty. Grant had told her. And Emily had reacted. But Miller still needed the how. He needed the proof. He went back to Weston. He got a warrant to search the house, top to bottom. This time, he wasn't a sympathetic visitor. The kids were back at college. Emily was alone. She was polite. Calm. Detective? What is this? Is something wrong? We're just finalizing the report, Mrs. Walker, Miller lied. His team swept the house. They took computers. They took files. They sprayed luminol in the garage. The garage lit up. There was blood spatter, wiped clean, on the side of the heavy metal tool chest. It was away from the car. Inconsistent with the accident. And then, a young forensic tech in the study called out. Detective. You might want to see this. He was looking at the bronze bull statue. It was clean. Too clean. It had been scrubbed, but deep in the crevices, in the bull's ear, he found a trace. Something microscopic. He bagged it. Miller went to the kitchen, where Emily was sitting, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. Mrs. Walker, Miller said, his voice quiet. I just got off the phone with the medical examiner. He's thorough. Emily's grip on the mug tightened, just slightly. He found a second wound. An injury to the back of your husband's head. An injury that happened before the car fell on him. Emily didn't say anything. She just stared into her tea. I also spoke, Miller continued, to a woman in Miami. An Amanda Riley. Emily's head snapped up. Her eyes, for the first time, showed a flash of something. Not grief. Not fear. Rage. And my team, Miller said, is very good at their jobs. They found blood spatter on the tool chest. Wipe down. And we are testing a statue. From your study. He paused. He let the silence hang in the air, thick and heavy. You're a smart woman, Emily. You were pushed. He betrayed you. I know he did. Miller was guessing, but he was guessing right. He took your money. He was leaving you for a younger woman. He was leaving you with nothing. Emily Walker looked up at Detective Miller. The mask of the grieving widow was gone. The mask of the perfect wife was gone. All that was left was a woman who had been pushed past her limit. Her eyes were cold. Clear. He told me I was nothing, she said, her voice a low, steady whisper. He laughed at me. After 25 years, he laughed. It was a confession. Miller's heart sank. Emily Walker, he said, you are under arrest for the murder of your husband, Grant Walker. She didn't cry. She didn't resist. She just stood up, placed her teacup in the sink, and held her hands out for the cuffs. The news hit Weston like a bomb. The Weston widow was the Weston killer. The story went national. The perfect, tragic accident was now a story of cold, calculated revenge. Pause, music shift to a dramatic, courtroom theme. The trial of Emily Walker was the biggest media event Massachusetts had seen in decades. The press dubbed it the Deadly Vows trial. The courtroom was packed every single day. People wanted to see her. The elegant, high society wife who had supposedly bludgeoned her husband and crushed him with a Jaguar. Emily sat at the defense table, looking just as she always had. Elegant. Composed. Her hair was perfect. Her suits were tasteful. She looked like she was attending a board meeting, not her own murder trial. The prosecution came out swinging. They painted Emily as a cold, vindictive, greedy woman. This wasn't a crime of passion, they argued. This was a calculated execution. This, the prosecutor boomed in his opening statement, is a woman who discovered her husband was leaving her. And rather than face the humiliation, rather than a loser to a younger woman, she decided to keep it all. The house. The status. The money. And she did it in the most brutal way possible. They laid out their evidence, piece by piece. It was devastating. They had the financial records, showing Grant's theft, which gave Emily the motive. They had the ME's report. Dr. Aries testified, in clinical, gruesome detail, about the wound to the back of Grant's head. The pattern contusion matches, precisely, the horn of the bronze bull statue found in the defendant's study, he said. They had the forensic evidence from the garage. The wiped-down blood spatter. The testimony from the 911 dispatcher about Emily's performance on the phone call. The prosecutor's star witness, however, was Amanda Riley. She took the stand, weeping. She told the jury how Grant had lied to her, how he'd promised her a future. But she also testified that Grant had told her, Emily is unstable. I'm actually a little afraid of what she'll do when I tell her. This was a major blow to the defense. The prosecution used it to argue that Emily had a history of instability, that this was a premeditated act of rage. Then, it was the defense's turn. Emily's lawyer didn't try to argue that she didn't do it. The evidence was too overwhelming. Instead, they argued that she snapped. They painted a different portrait of Emily Walker. Not a cold killer, but a victim. A victim of 25 years of psychological abuse, gaslighting, and devastating betrayal. Emily Walker is not a monster, her lawyer argued, his voice full of passion. She is a woman who was pushed to the absolute edge. This is not a case of a whodunit. This is a case of why. This wasn't a murder. This was a tragedy. A life was broken, and another one snapped in response. They brought Emily's friends to the stand, who testified about how they'd seen her fade over the last year. How she'd lost weight. How she'd seemed haunted. And then, the moment everyone was waiting for. Emily Walker took the stand. The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. She walked calmly to the witness box. She swore her oath. Her lawyer started gently. He had her describe her marriage. Her children. The life she built. She spoke with love and quiet pride. Then, he took her to that night. Emily, what happened when you found the laptop? Emily, for the first time, showed emotion. Her voice thickened. She described the photos. The emails. The stolen money. It wasn't the affair, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I think I could have survived that. It was the erasure. He was taking my life. My children's future. He was planning to leave me with nothing, or to make me a nothing. And what happened, her lawyer asked, when you confronted him in the garage? Emily looked at the jury. Her eyes were clear. I told him I knew. I told him I knew everything. And what did he say? He laughed, Emily said. The courtroom gasped. He laughed at me. He told me I was nothing. A leech. He told me I was old. He said, what are you going to do about it? And he turned his back on me. And what, her lawyer asked, his voice soft, did you do? Emily took a deep breath. I picked up his award. The Bronze Bull. And I hit him. Were you trying to kill him, Emily? I don't know, she whispered. I couldn't let him win. I couldn't let him destroy us and just walk away. Laughing. The prosecutor was brutal on cross-examination. You say you snapped, Mrs. Walker, but a person who snaps doesn't then have the clarity to stage a crime scene, do they? Emily was quiet. You dragged his body, didn't you? You positioned him under that car. And then you released the jack. Is that what a person who snapped does? I don't know. And then you waited, the prosecutor shouted. You didn't call 911. You went upstairs. You showered. You cleaned the murder weapon. You made tea. And 2 hours later, you faked the most convincing 911 call of your life. That's not passion, Mrs. Walker. That's premeditation. Emily Walker had no answer. She just stared at him. The jury deliberated for 3 long days. The nation waited. Was she a victim who snapped, or a cold, calculating killer? The courtroom fell silent as the jury filed back in. On the charge of murder in the first degree. Emily closed her eyes. We find the defendant, Emily Walker, guilty. Pause, there were gasps. Emily's children, sitting in the front row, broke down in sobs. Emily didn't react. She just nodded, once, as if she had been expecting it all along. At the sentencing, the judge was unsparing. The staging of the scene, the 2-hour wait before calling 911? It proved premeditation. It proved malice. He sentenced her to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Justice, at last. But as Emily Walker was led from the courtroom, no one was cheering. Grant's family had lost a son. Emily's family had lost a daughter. And 2 children had lost both their parents in one terrible night. No one left that courtroom feeling victorious. Pause, music shift to a reflective, somber theme. In the aftermath, the perfect world of the Walkers didn't just crack, it shattered and turned to dust. The true victims, as they so often are, were the children. Alex and Olivia. Their father was dead. Their mother was his killer. They were left with a mountain of debt, as Grant had successfully hidden or spent most of the money. The beautiful home in Weston, the house they grew up in, was foreclosed on by the bank to pay the second mortgage they never knew existed. They were adrift. They both dropped out of college. They changed their last names. They moved across the country, trying to escape the shadow of their parents' tragedy. Trying to escape the reporters and the whispered judgments. Amanda Riley, the other woman, saw her life ruined as well. She was branded in the media as a homewrecker, the catalyst for a brutal murder. She, too, had to change her name and move. And the house, the magnificent colonial on the tree-lined street, it sat empty for years. A dark monument. No one in Weston wanted to live there. It was the murder house. It became a silent reminder to the entire community that the perfect lawns and charming facades, they could hide the darkest, most terrifying secrets. As for Emily, she was sent to MCI Framingham, the state prison for women. She is, by all accounts, a model prisoner. She works in the library. She reads. She is quiet, polite. She has never had a single disciplinary infraction. She has never had a visitor. Her children have never come to see her. When a prison psychiatrist asked her if she felt remorse for what she'd done, Emily reportedly just looked at him, with those clear, calm eyes, and said, "I regret that my children were hurt. But, he deserved it. Pause, till death do us part." For Grant and Emily Walker, that vow wasn't a promise of eternal love. It was a binding contract, and a brutal prophecy. Love and hate, you see, they aren't opposites. They are neighbors. They live on the same street, in the same heart. And sometimes, the fence between them is terrifyingly thin. Betrayal is the storm that tears that fence down. Grant's betrayal wasn't just a simple affair. It was a complete and total assassination of the life he and Emily had built. He didn't just cheat on her, he tried to erase her. And in the end, Emily's revenge was absolute. She got it. He never got to be with his new woman. He never got to spend the money he stole. He never got to start his new life. But what did that revenge cost? Everything. It cost her freedom. It cost her her home. It cost her her name. And it cost her the two people she loved most in the world, her children. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. But it's a poison. It may kill your enemy, but it rots the vessel that holds it. It leaves nothing behind but ruins, ruins where a life, and a love, once lived. We are left to wonder, was there a moment? A single second where Emily could have just walked away? Called a lawyer? Let the courts handle it? Or was that final, arrogant laugh, that sneering, dismissive "what are you going to do about it?" the spark that made the inferno inevitable? It's a haunting question. If the person you loved most in the world, the person you had given your entire life to, didn't just break your heart, but tried to destroy your very existence, how far would you go for revenge?